Dillian Whyte is very knowledgeable about boxing. Far more knowledgeable than most heavyweights in the top 10, for example. I mean, even AJ, if you hear him talk about boxing, he doesn't actually know that much about boxing history. He doesn't know that much about fighters in other divisions. Now, after the Andy Ruiz loss, I noticed in interviews he was starting to talk about boxing history a bit more and clearly had been watching older fights and what have you. So he'd been trying to learn more about the history of the sport. But even still, he doesn't have the kind of knowledge that Dillian Whyte has. Dillian Whyte, from way back, long before he was with Eddie Hearn, I think this was even before his ban. I watched interviews with Dillian Whyte where he was talking about fighters from the 70s and stuff like that, and had good knowledge of them. So this is a guy that knows boxing. It always amazes me, actually, how little some fighters know about boxing in terms of the history, in terms of fighters in other divisions. There have even been quite a few fighters that have come out and said they don't watch boxing at all, which is just incredible to me. But anyway, Dillian Whyte is not one of those guys. He's one of the few who is a real boxing buff. And that's why it was a bit curious to me when Oleksandr Usyk was first talking about stepping up to heavyweight. Dillian Whyte was asked how he thought Usyk would do at heavyweight, and he was very dismissive. He's too small. He's not going to be able to compete with the big boys. And once he moved up, it was the same type of attitude from Dillian Whyte. There was even some talk about Usyk maybe fighting Dillian Whyte, and again, Dillian Whyte became even more dismissive of Usyk. Now, as well as Dillian Whyte knows boxing, he will have known about people like Jimmy Young. He obviously knows about Evander Holyfield. He knows about plenty, Michael Spinks, of smaller guys coming up in weight and beating bigger guys. So for him to be so dismissive of Usyk, to me, I didn't believe him. I personally believe that Dillian Whyte, either consciously or subconsciously, understood that Usyk was a major problem all along. But he was wishful thinking when he was talking about Usyk's not going to be big enough, he don't have the power, this, that, and the other. It's wishful thinking. Now, interestingly, if you rewind a few days and go and have a look at Dean White talking about the AJ Usyk fight and his prediction for the fight, he said that it was going to be a real tough fight for AJ and that it was going to go the distance and be close. That's my recollection anyway of what he said. So he was thinking along the same lines as me, this is going to be a real tough, close fight. And AJ is going to have plenty of pro. He's going to have his work cut out here. Whereas with Dillian Whyte, he was saying, oh no, AJ's going to knock him out in 7 rounds. He's going to be too big, too strong for him. I personally think that that's what he wanted to believe. I think deep down, somebody with the kind of knowledge Dillian Whyte has about boxing, he knew Usyk was going to be a problem. He knew. He just didn't want to believe it. That's what it was. So if you look at Dillian Whyte's interviews after the fight in the arena and also the next day, he was very disappointed in Anthony Joshua. He called him a weirdo. He said AJ should have stuck it on him. He should have done this. He should have done that. And Dillian actually had the fight a lot closer than he should have had it, in my opinion. A lot closer. Because I rewatched the fight last night. I gave AJ 3 rounds. 9 rounds to Usyk. If you're really generous, you could give AJ 4. But that's still 8 rounds to Usyk, right? So Dillian Whyte had it much closer than that from what I remember. Again, because he's wishful thinking. He's trying to do Joshua a favor because he realizes what a threat Oleksandr Usyk is. Not like Usyk's going to come through the heavyweight division and knock everybody out. No, he's not really that type of fighter. He wasn't a knockout merchant at cruiserweight. He's not going to be a knockout merchant at heavyweight. As we saw in the AJ fight, if you're a little vulnerable, he can still hurt you. But he's not going to be doing what AJ's done, for example, to a lot of people and just wipe them out, or Deontay Wilder, etc. Or even Dillian himself, who's got very good punching power. No, Usyk's not going to be that kind of guy, but he is going to be the kind of guy, and he already has proven this, that can outmaneuver you, that can mess with the range. He's got tremendous head movement. He'll prevent you from getting set, and he'll counter you all over the place. So when I saw Dillian Whyte's face in that ringside interview, he had the look of a man who can't deny his eyes anymore. Usyk is a problem for everyone, and that's just what it is. He's not a 40-year-old Alexander Povetkin. This is a 34-year-old man who might actually be peaking. If he's not peaking, he's only just past his peak. This is an Olympic gold medalist, former undisputed cruiserweight champion. This is a guy who can move for 12 rounds and fight at a good pace and still have enough energy left in the 12th to go for the knockout, even when he didn't need it. It's a dangerous, dangerous man. Anthony Joshua has very good balance for a big man. Even though he was made to look clumsy and a bit silly by Usyk, don't get it twisted. AJ's got much better balance than Deontay Wilder. And on the front foot at least, he's got better balance than Tyson Fury. Maybe not moving back, although AJ's balance is not bad moving back. Tyson Fury is just a little bit slicker in that mode. But on the front foot, AJ has better balance than Fury. But look what Usyk did to him. So if you think that AJ's footwork looked a little clumsy coming forward, Tyson Fury's footwork would look even more clumsy coming forward against Usyk. Ditto for Deontay Wilder. But if there's one positive for the other big guys in the division, is Usyk has now revealed his hand. They know what he can do against the big boys. So they'll be better prepared. They'll know not to make the same strategic mistakes that AJ made and perhaps the same technical mistakes. And this is where you actually have to give AJ a lot of credit because he's taking on guys due to the fact that he's or was unified heavyweight champion, taking on people who the other big names in the division are not taking on. Albeit in this case with a rematch clause attached, which I definitely don't agree with. Mandatory challengers should not be signing rematch clauses. Nevertheless, he could have vacated the WBO belt and not fought Usyk, allowed Usyk to fight Joe Joyce for the vacant. I'm curious to find out whether Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder will be keen on facing Oleksandr Usyk, whichever one of those guys wins their trilogy fight. Because from what Shelly Finkel has recently said, if Wilder beats Tyson Fury, he's not going to be in any rush to make the undisputed fight, which means in no rush to fight Oleksandr Usyk, assuming the AJ rematch doesn't go ahead or Usyk beats AJ in the rematch. So that's interesting, isn't it? And with Tyson Fury, knowing how clever he is with regards to managing his career, I know MTK or his management company and all that, but Tyson Fury has a lot of input in terms of who he fights and when he fights them. Always has had. And knowing his history with regards to very clever management, he's not the kind of guy to just dive headlong into every challenge against anybody out there, no matter what. That's not what Tyson Fury tends to do. He's a bit more Mayweather about it. He's beaten very good people, yes, but he's calculating about who he fights and when he fights them, rather than just taking on all comers at any time. So will he really just go straight into an Usyk fight? Imagine Usyk fights AJ again in the rematch. Looks even better. Tyson Fury going to go straight into the undisputed fight. Let's say he struggles against Wilder. You know? We'll see. But point is, Dillian Whyte, in my opinion, in my estimation, he knew all along that Usyk was a serious threat to the big boys. He just didn't want to believe it. Anyway, give me your thoughts in the comments below.